Welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio with Tom minus the Ramon tonight. We are recording this on March 4th, 2014, and wow, I'll tell you what, guys, this has been quite an experience this year for me already, and I mean, it seems like it just started yesterday, but already so much has happened in my own life that some new doors have been opening, and new epiphanies and experiences. And I shared with you guys last week the experience, or maybe not on this show, maybe that was on the live show on Truth Frequency, but I shared the experience I've just had with a relative who made the transition, and all the sensations and the communications that happened between me, the immediate family, and the party who had transferred or transitioned. And it was quite an experience. It brought me to a completely new level of knowing of the afterlife. As you guys know, I have had my opportunities, I guess is the right word, to communicate with those on the other side from time to time, and it has been, those times have been remarkable in themselves, but this experience I had last week took it all to a whole new level. Anyways, I just wanted to share that again, that things are growing fast and going fast. Anyway, since Ramon's not here tonight, I would like to maybe toss out his news stories that he normally likes to throw out there. And I found this one on the Before It's News website. And some guy has got, and this just came out Sunday. The title of the article is Alien Inside Flying Saucer, UFO Sightings, Best UFO Footage of 2014. This guy's got about 30 minutes of video of what appears to be a craft it's at night, a craft on the ground, and this is some stuff from pretty close. And there appears to be occupants walking around. This one, in my book, guys, this one would be really hard to fake, but with the CGI out there, we still got to use our discernment. So I will throw a link on the website there in the news section. You guys can check it out for yourself. Another thing I'd like to talk about is the rodent coil. Now, this is an article that's out on the collectivevolution.com website. And it's bringing the rodent coil back up to the front page. And you guys, if you've listened to any of our shows on the free energy type shows, you've heard us talk about the rodent coil and the amazing mathematics that Dino Rodin has put together in developing this coil, and it's proving out to be quite an amazing piece of work. We're organically and naturally flowing energy using those sacred geometric patterns, and they're finding some absolutely fascinating results with this. So, and one thing about Dino Rodin, God, I love you, Dino, man. You're awesome for putting this stuff open source on the internet. That's one thing about, it's one of those delineating lines for me as far as the integrity of the people out there, on whether or not, on how they're presenting their material and their information out to the populace. Is it accessible? That's the big question in my mind. Is it accessible? And Dino's doing some fantastic work with putting this stuff out there. Okay, so that link will also be in the news section, and I'm going to cut to the chase, and we're going to get right into our show tonight, which I think you guys are going to absolutely love. We have Shonagh Home, and if I pronounce that wrong, Shauna, you're just going to have to beat me up or something.
No, that was perfect.
Okay, Shonagh Home is an author, shaman, and spell breaker who takes her students beyond the cultural mass trance and into the territory of the sacred. Her work is infused with owl medicine, bee medicine, and the ever-present guidance of Mother Earth. Shauna teaches a variety of life-renovating classes that assist people to release chronic behavior patterns and access a wealth of inner resources. She says, I think of myself as a spiritual warrior, and a spiritual warrior seeks to know. They are on a quest to know. Her journey through, or her book, Love and Spirit Medicine, chronicles her mystical journey through the end of her marriage and into the focused shamanic exploration of entheogenic mushrooms. Her previous book is Chel Wisdom, Seven Teachings from the Mayan Sacred Feminine, is a love letter to women, opening them up to the mystery of their feminine nature. Her website is www.shonaghome, that's ShonaghHome.com. And I'd like to give you a big warm 100th Monkey welcome to our show, Shauna.
Oh, thank you, Tom. I'm so excited for this. It's great to be here.
Oh, this is great. It's awesome that we realized before the show that we were both at the same event here this last year. Small world, huh?
Yes, I love that. I love that, actually.
So Shauna, one of the initial questions that we like to ask our guests is what was it that turned your head towards the spiritual, towards the mystical? A lot of us, it takes the proverbial 2x4 upside the head to get us moving in a more focused direction towards this stuff. What was it for you?
Well, I got the 2x4 myself at 40. However, when I was much younger, I was very much in touch with I would say, the sort of magical realms, the nature realms as a child. And also as a child, I was very naturally claircognizant, where you have the instant knowing, and also clairsentient, where you feel very deeply. And I used to call it confirmations, because of course, there was no touchstone for this in our culture even today, right? So I didn't really know what this was, but I just knew that information would come in, and at certain times there was a quality to it, and I knew there was no bargaining, there was no fighting. Like that was the truth coming in, and so I had no real sort of control over that, but I did make note of that at a young age, and then kind of lost touch with that as I tried, at least, to assimilate into this insane culture that we live in, and but kind of flirted with this a little bit sort of through the course of my life, but it really wasn't until I was 40 and my marriage fell apart and I became a single mom, which I never thought in my wildest dreams would occur. And that's when I cracked right open spiritually, and I started meditating every day, and I read every book I could get my hands on, and then I fell into an exploration of shamanism, which for me was like a homecoming, and I have not looked back. And so I have just continued to deepen that practice for the last decade, and I teach, but I don't consider myself any kind of a master. I'm a voracious seeker, and then I go in deep, and then I come out and I share, and so that's how I do my teaching.
Hmm. Didn't you do some learning down in South America also?
Yes, I did. I have a beautiful teacher and friend there, Miguel Angel Vergara, who I met, oh gosh, probably 7 years ago at this point, 6, 7 years ago, and yeah, worked with him quite a bit. In fact, now he and I host beautiful journeys down there, and I am hosting another journey with him, in fact, in October, through different Mayan ruins, including Palenque, and that one is called The Path of the Initiate, reclaiming your spiritual authority. And he's a beautiful, beautiful man. He's not like a showboat kind of shaman guy with a big ego. He's very heart-centered, quiet, humble man, and just a beautiful person. And that's really how my teachers have been. I found some really, really good teachers in that regard, with a lot of integrity, who are, like myself, I must say, very quietly doing good work. Well, I don't mean like myself, I'm such a good teacher, but I mean like me, very quietly doing good work. In other words, you don't necessarily know who these people are, you know what I mean? But
Right.
there is, I think, a good number of really wonderful people out there, who are doing this kind of work. And it's really good, because, we need more of those people.
Absolutely. The unsung heroes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing, that there's so many people that head south for that shamanic teaching, for those. It seems like it's almost there's so many of the Western. I guess the best way to describe them is Western shaman. The westernized shaman. They at some point in their learning, in their process for developing themselves as a shaman, it seems like it's one of those pilgrimages type things down to South America to learn with a real shaman, an indigenous shaman. And I'm just curious, was there something that you got out of that experience down in South America that you don't think you could have found up here?
Well, actually, there was because, now, granted, I mean, I didn't, when I first went to, this was in the Yucatan, and I went there. My husband at the time was really into all things Mayan, and I wasn't really called to that at all, which is just so funny.
Mm.
So I accompanied him on a trip there. It was like a sacred journey, and it was with Miguel Angel and another teacher, and it was at those Mayan ruins, actually of Uxmal. I sort of wandered off by myself, which I like to do, and stood in a very quiet, hidden part of the temple, and just talked to the spirits there. And I did toning, and my hands went into spontaneous mudras, which had never happened before. And then when I was done, I received a message back, and a message of such love and being received and welcomed. And I was so surprised. I wasn't expecting that at all. And that just opened up a whole new world for me. And then I wanted to continue working with Miguel Angel because I really connected with him. And so I did fly down there. It wasn't until a couple of years later. And I worked with him quite a bit, and then I remember he took me to another shaman, and they took me to these caves near Uxmal, and we stood outside the caves, and that shaman was kind of, eyeing me, and he was talking to me, and he said, well, why are you here? And I said, well, I'm really here because I want to learn, and I want to be a teacher. I want to help a lot of people. And he said, there's more. And I said, well, you know what? Really, the whole reason why I do this is because I want a deeper connection to God, to the sacred. And he said, you're going to get a Mayan baptism. And so they took me into the cave and had this very beautiful ritual where I was given this baptism. And then during that, before he gave me the baptism, he introduced me to the Mayan cosmic mother goddess named Ixchel. And I had this very amazing experience where I felt all this energy come into me, and then he said, she's come in, she's in you, so he affirmed that. And then when I got home from that experience, she began speaking to me. So yes, I think that there are certainly some very activated sacred sites around the world where there are energies that are available to certain people if you open up to them. And so for me, I just happened to be at that place at that time, with these two men who were shamans, and I don't really think I would have had an experience like that in Seattle, but you never know.
Right. Yeah. Well, that was the next point I was going to bring up was the sites and the physical locations on the planet and these places being energized. I mean, we do have it within the Western culture. We have all these, especially over in Europe and Asia and stuff. These sacred sites that have been active for thousands of years. Where they've been constantly been used for ritual purposes, etc. That energy does build in those locations, and it's absorbed in those locations. So absolutely, I can definitely see where, especially in the shamanic path, if you are leaning towards the more indigenous, native indigenous, more. I guess I'm looking for a term to describe the more indigenous type of shamanism that is not Western, from the Western culture. Because I suppose in the European areas, I mean, I still see shaman there though, but it's a little bit different flavor. You
Yeah.
understand?
Yeah, I do. And actually, I want to be quick to say that for myself, I'm not an Indigenous person wannabe. I'm really not. I am Celtic, Scottish, and French, and those are magical bloodlines, just as I'm sure your bloodlines are magical, And if you trace those bloodlines back, you will find some good, strong shamanic energies in there as well. And so, something brought me to the Maya lands. And so, whether you call it past lives or whatever it was, there was some kind of beauty energy that I was responding to there, and it calls me back pretty often. I really, really love it there. And that being said, I live in the Pacific Northwest, and I absolutely love it here. And I know we're going to get to talking about entheogenic mushrooms, plant medicine. So I had that experience in the beautiful rainforest of Washington, and my goodness, that deepened my love and appreciation of this beautiful area where you and I both live so much, and really deepened my connection to nature. And so, really, anywhere in nature, I think, not anywhere, but great many places in nature are temples unto themselves, And I think the Pacific Northwest is just one gorgeous, pulsating, vibrational temple. It really is beautiful here.
There seems to be some locations on the planet, and I think the Northwest is one of those areas that it seems to be like a magnet for consciousness, for conscious people. I just see, especially down here, I'm 100 miles south of you, and the whole Olympia area, it's very green, I guess is a good term for it. If they're not on a conscious path, they're super ecologically conscious and aware. They're very conscious about recycling and taking care of the planet, and not littering, and not doing stupid stuff. So I think that this is definitely one of those locations, and I'm going to guess that there are spots all over the planet on each continent that have similar flavors.
Yes, there absolutely are, and I think our ancestors of a few thousand years ago and beyond, that was a totally different existence, and they were, many of them, very, very much in touch with the land and the telluric energies, and they could tell where the ley lines were, where the vortexes were, right? And then they would build their temples. And then, of course, the Catholic Church came around and wiped those guys out and plunked their temples on their churches on the very spots that the pagans had their temples, and there's a reason for that. So there's a lot. Those sites in themselves, I think, were very strategically chosen as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Foundation upon foundation upon foundation upon foundation.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. There's been places built on some of those locations probably as long as long as consciousness has been here, anyways.
Yeah.
So I know let's get into the entheogenic side of things. I have definitely done my voyaging along those lines myself, and the first times I ever did this stuff, it was from a recreational standpoint, in a third dimensional perspective of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So I really didn't get much out of it back in those days when I was playing around with it along those lines. Once I got my feet on the conscious path, the thought and idea of altering my reality, just the thought of it had a completely different impact on me. And there was actually a sense of fear that I felt within myself that for just exploring that avenue, especially after I started to understand and know, started to come to a knowing that there were more things beyond what I could, sense with my five senses. I'm curious what your first experiences were and what took you to those first experiences also.
Sure. Well, I had been, as I said, a voracious student of shamanism for probably 7 years, and I had been called to the plant medicine, but I wanted just the right experience. I was curious about the ayahuasca, but I was also hearing about these unscrupulous shamans, shall we say, who are helping themselves sexually to women on the medicine. And so I remember saying, well, where are the female ayahuasca shamans? Where are they? And not a month later, then I hear about a circle of all women led by two female ayahuasca shamans. And that's kind of how my life goes. So I experienced that for a weekend, and that was very intense and very incredible. And actually, grandmother ayahuasca kicked my ass that first night. Oh my God. And so very, very powerful. And I did it a couple of other times in ceremony after that, but it just was coming to me like, this is not your medicine. And I was like, all right. But what kept calling me was the mushroom. And I was in a shamanic kind of study group for 2 years with a wonderful teacher, and there were 10 of us, and one of them was a dear friend of mine in that group, and he did a lot of work with this medicine, and from a very reverent place, and he was very, very connected to nature as well, and a hermit, just a really unusual and beautiful man. And so I asked him if he would induct me into the mushrooms, and he said sure. And so we did it very shamanically, where we did it, and also followed Terence McKenna's directive. He was listening to a lot of Terence. He turned me on to Terence McKenna, and so it was 5 dried grams of mushrooms in the dark, lying down, eyes closed, and we did this outside in the beautiful rainforest. It was amazing, amazing, and so that was my first experience, and I proceeded to have a very, very deep healing experience where the earth spoke to me, and she was so kind, and I didn't know what to expect, and that just really moved me, so that when I came home from that experience, I go deep, and it occurred to me like, wait a minute, this is a portal. This is a portal, and I need to explore this again, So I asked him if I could come back out there the next month and experience that again, which I did. And so that began for me a series for over a year of monthly shamanic immersions into that medicine. And I will say also that, I'm not a drinker. I don't do recreational drugs or other plant medicines. I don't, so this was done, in other words, from a place of great respect and a place of curiosity and of humility as well, and wanting to go in and talk to the spirits. And so what I understand now is, because, not many people do that. Not many people do 5 grams of mushrooms every single month in that way. And so there was a part of my being that knew precisely what it was doing, right? Just as there is for each and every one of us, our high self that doesn't care a fig what the societal expectations are, what the shoulds are. No, there is something that must be experienced, and you receive that calling, and some of us answer that calling and do it, no matter what people around us may think. And so to me, that is that is an essential experience, and so I am forever changed from that. And through those monthly immersions, I came into a relationship with a few different groups of intelligences, shall we say, and plant medicine spirits. One of them, bird tribe, and so the owl came through very powerfully for me every single month, and so that is the medicine that I work with now. And an owl medicine is it's intense. It's shadow. Owl sees in the dark, which means owl sees what others can't, and it sees what others won't. So, the work that I do when I work with people, we cut to the chase. I cut to the chase very quickly, and we go where we need to go, and it's ultimately incredibly beautiful and healing medicine. So that has been a result of my journeys. In addition, I came across a group of star beings, and that was, I guess a couple of years ago now, almost a year and a half ago. And all of this is written about in my book called Love and Spirit Medicine, which is published. It's available on Amazon and other places. Because when I began this journey, I am an autodidact. I love to learn. I love to research. And I started reading every book I could find on entheogenic mushrooms. And almost every single book was written by a man. And they were great books, mind you. But I was seeking a woman's experience. And, the only other book I can really think of which I loved was Black Smoke by Margaret DeWeese, but that was focused on her experiences with ayahuasca. So, but there's nothing that I know of, certainly nothing like my book, where it goes into the application of this medicine. Because it's one thing, as you well know, to do this medicine and to do it once or twice or a few times, but then what is the application of that medicine in your life? How did it change you? What changed? What shifted? And so I go very deep in my book through that journey because, of course, at that time, my marriage was ending. It was at the end. And so it was a very, very profound time for me. And I'm also not, 32, I'm 50. So I experienced this around midlife, and which I'm so glad, actually, because I had the maturity, to bring to the experience. Whereas, when I was much younger, I was immature and naive and all that stuff, right? So spirit brings you, I think, to, situations. It's all about timing. So I have just tremendous respect for this medicine, and when I do work with it, it is very ritually, shamanically. In other words, it's not like a casual event for me. And the other thing too with the mushroom, if I can just sort of go off here for a few minutes, is that we have medicines like peyote and like ayahuasca, if you're with a good shaman, where there are beautiful rituals woven into that medicine. There is a container, in other words, in which to take that medicine. The mushroom is kind of rogue,
Right.
There's no mushroom shamans walking around town, If you are lucky enough to find one in Oaxaca, Mexico, great, have at it. But, I don't think those people are too easy to find either these days. So that was the other piece is my friend, his name is Leaf in the book. Leaf and I realized, we don't have a shaman to guide us. So let's bring everything we know to the table here, and engage this in a very reverent way. And I think, the level of depth and experience that I had was directly a result of my approach to it as well, with open heart and humility. So yeah, I love this medicine. It's beautiful. It's heart medicine. It's really powerful.
That is one thing that kind of slipped out of Western society was the reverence for those medicines, those natural medicines that are out there. I'd say the last 150 years or so, it's the westernization and the materialization of society has pretty much taken the sacredness out of going into those altered states of mind and experiencing those other realities.
Well, certainly the altered states of mind that expand your awareness.
Exactly.
Your consciousness, because there's plenty of altered states available to you in this culture, but they will destroy you. For instance, alcohol, prescription drugs. Then there's coffee and sugar, and those are all altered states as well. And then there's those horrendous street drugs, which, despite Big Brother breathing down our necks, for some reason, they don't seem to be able to quell,
Right.
all those street drugs. You and I could find those guys no problem, but for some reason, I don't know,
Right.
NSA is just not on the ball with those guys. I wonder why.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we'll go into the whole CIA's
No,
involvement.
no, no.
But,
Well,
yeah.
there's no need, but I'm simply pointing out that
Right.
I do find it very interesting that the medicines of consciousness, shall we say, the true plant medicines that where you will touch the sacred, those are illegal. Now, so are the very, very bad, druggy drugs, like cocaine and heroin stuff. And yet, cocaine and heroin, those are pretty easy to get, from what I
Right.
hear. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like if you find your local drug dealer and ask him if he's got some mushrooms, I think he'd look at you like you had two heads.
Right.
But he's got plenty of other stuff that will absolutely destroy you.
Yeah.
So this has actually helped me a lot as a mother too, because I am a mother of two teenage girls. And so I have had some really amazing discussions with particularly my older daughter at this point about drugs. The difference between drug and a plant medicine, and then alcohol, what that will do to you. And so, the medicine has helped me so much in that regard as well. I would not have had the perspective that I have today if I hadn't had that experience.
Right. So let's talk about the owl. I mean, that energy, the owl energy, that shadow work energy has made a tremendous resurgence in the last couple of years, in particular, at least what my bubble of awareness, what I've been exposed to. I've seen a huge amount of people that have been diving into that shadow work and getting that stuff done. And it is such an important point and an important process for us to go through right now. Tell me a little bit about that owl energy that you're talking about.
Yeah, of course. I'll say, first of all, before I started doing the mushroom medicine, 2 years prior to that, I was in the Yucatan working with Miguel Angel, and he took me to a Mayan shaman. And this man gave me a blessing, and then I said thank you, and I left, and he came running after me, and he gifted me an owl amulet. And I remember thinking, well, that's very nice. Why the owl, And I just always kept it. And it wasn't until I started doing the mushroom medicine that the owls started coming in, and there would always be an owl around us somewhere outside hooting, and a couple times flew right over us. I mean, amazing phenomena with the owl. And then I was gifted from a dear friend of mine who's Native American who works with medicine pieces. She called me out of the blue on a Monday after I'd been with my friend Leaf that weekend, and we had done the medicine, and I had a particularly profound experience with owl on the medicine. She calls me out of the blue to say she has a gift for me, and it was something that was bequeathed to her by a dear friend who died 4 years ago. And it was the tale of a snowy white owl, and which I remember almost falling to the ground. I was so stunned, like, what is going on? Because, of course, I was having synchronicity after synchronicity after synchronicity of how pronounced the owl was coming to me. And she explained that white owl works with the inner child. And it's very, very, very deep, deep healing, but very, very gentle. And I then that white owl fan arrived because she made a beautiful medicine piece for me. It arrived on a Friday after I was just heartbroken in a very dark night of the soul, and I was going to do the medicine all by myself for the very first time. And that fan arrived on that exact day, interestingly. And so with that fan, I took it into my room and I proceeded to do the medicine. Mind you, my children were away. I never ever do this when they're anywhere, even in the same town. In any case, I had a profound spiritual experience where White Owl came to me as a woman and stayed with me the entire medicine experience. And just changed me forever, and that is in the book as well. And so now my work is so different now. It's amazing. So when I work one-on-one with someone, I use an owl wing, and I work with Copal, and the wing will just go where it wants to go around that person, and I am given information about that person, and again, it can often be very deeply personal information. So in other words, owl, like I said, it can see in the dark, right? So it will just cut to the essence of what needs to be dealt with, and at the same time does so with so much kindness and grace. There is a very deep love, I think, to the medicine of owl. Now, having said that, there are certain Native American cultures who regard the owl as a messenger of death, and they won't allow any owl feathers or anything within ceremony, so there's different cultures who regard owl differently. But I must say, just as you have hinted at, there are a number of people, many, many people, men and women right now that I see who the owl is coming to. And like you said, the shadow, this is essential right now that we clean up our own house, because our culture, our planet is a mess right now. It's a mess. And so it's really easy to point the finger, and it is. I mean, there are, large corporate interests, of course, that know better and could care less. By the same token, we each individually have to do our inner work and clean up our own mess inside. And so that is to bring our shadow stuff, the stuff that we don't really necessarily want to admit or look at within ourselves. We have to bring that into the light and make that conscious. Otherwise, it continues to run you, when it's unconscious. And so that is shadow work is something I've been doing for, probably 8 years, 7, 8 years now. And I actually began with a teacher who's dead now, Brew Joy, who was a master of shadow. And he introduced me to all of that. I had no concept of that even before that. And so, and that is also, by the way, not work that you sort of do and then you're done. Not like you take a workshop, you do some shadow work and you're good to go. No, shadow work is that's a lifelong process, as I'm sure you know. but well worth it, because you know what this is? This is about knowing thyself, that maxim on the Temple of Delphi from so long ago that says, know thyself. All right? So to know thyself, this also means you must know that there's the darker parts of you. You must know your Achilles heels. The part, if you don't, that part will trip you up, right? And I even will say, like, someone who like runs a company, who knows themselves really well, who's had a really good handle on what they're good at, but also what they're not good at. They know what their weak points are. So that way, they'll delegate those to other people, because they know, I can't do all of it. My ego's healthy enough to know that. And they run, hopefully a great company, because they have that good understanding of who they are. And so this is, for all of us in our own life. And boy, it does rear its ugly head in relationships. And my book delves very deeply into relationship, and I explore my own personal shadow and projection, because I think relationship, speaking of shadow, is like the modern day mystery school.
I like that. I like the way you put that.
Yes, it's a very initiatory process. And I will also say that the way you end a relationship is every bit as important as how you begin it and how it goes during. The ending is very, you think you're spiritually, you've done a little work and you're getting advanced there. Go get divorced or end a relationship and get back to me on that one. Like, it's a really good, not that we choose this, but, it is a good way to kind of gauge where you're at, right? Because, we're emotional, we're bruised maybe, and we want to point the finger and we want to blame and we want to, all that stuff. And so that's a a crucial time, if you can kind of be on yourself as best you can in that emotional state to kind of catch yourself, where you go into kind of unconscious patterns and start, replaying themes for yourself. If you can, that's the shadow work, is bringing that stuff into the light so that you don't keep repeating all of those patterns, that make you miserable.
I guess I get a gold star. I
You
just,
get a gold star?
I just actually, and the only reason I can really talk about this is because of the way my last relationship ended. We are still friends, lovers, greatest. I mean, we are allies. We've done so much for each other, and this was just last month. And I mean, just the other day we sat and we talked on Skype for a couple of hours, and I mean, it's just amazing. I never, from where I grew up, that's not how people ended relationships.
Right.
There was always that some bitter feelings somewhere along the lines. It's just absolute. I just find the whole process absolutely amazing from where I am now. I mean, I look at where I was, 10 years ago, and oh my God, it never would have ended like that. But yeah, you make a very strong point there. It is a good marker on where you are in your own personal path and how you look at the rest of the world too.
Well, yeah, because you're all triggered, you got really intimate with someone and vulnerable, and, it didn't work out. And yeah. So in the book, in my book, I go into that very much so. And then at the end of the book, there's just all these resolutions at the end of the book, which was such a miracle. And my ex-husband and I are, friends. We're still actually sharing the house, which hopefully I'll be moving out of here shortly. But, it's been really wonderful. And we've been talking about that too, about how we've done divorce. This is not how it usually is, there's
Right,
usually,
right.
high drama, the whole works. And so we've been able to model really for our children that, yeah, sometimes these relationships don't work out, but it doesn't mean that you have to, behave like idiots, that this can be done from a much more conscious place. And that accounts for a lot, a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
So, but it takes work. It takes work. And the first, piece is to do your own work on yourself. It's also very easy. We all know what our partner needs to do. We know very full well what their issues are. You know what I mean?
Right, of course, of course.
But it's like, that doesn't matter. It's got to be, my stuff. Stay on the ball with myself and all that stuff. That being said, anyway, relationships they're quite something. They're quite something.
So what's one of the what's can you kind of walk me through the process of digging into one of those shadow aspects, that one of those triggered aspects or conditions that how would you approach something like that within someone when you're working with somebody? Say you sense something, and where do you go from there?
Well, then, I will ask questions, I mean, I did have someone I worked with once who was a referral who came, and I sensed all of this energy around her womb. And then I said, did you have an abortion recently? I feel this, and she said, yes. She said, I haven't told anybody. And I said, well, I can feel it all here. And then I also felt all this shame, great, great, great shame. So, in other words, this work, it's very intimate, by the way. It's very, very intimate. It gets very intimate very quickly in terms of that level of, relating with another person. And so, well, yeah. So without going really too deeply into that one, just there was a great deal revealed around, a piece she'd been carrying since childhood, and even just her inability to let herself be a mother, and the self-sabotage she was doing. So sort of what started from sort of one, just, a feeling that I got, and, a question, and then went from there very, very deeply into this piece for her. And so
Do you
that's
feel
one
like
example.
the questioning process is that the questioning process of somebody is one of the more one of the better ways to get them to actually acknowledge or to be able to see the shadow within self?
Yes, it can. Now, I will say too, it all depends on who you're working with, and you have to tread, sort of tread gently with people as well, because, Brew, my teacher, used to talk about this. The ego has a real hard time with shadow work, a really, really hard time. And so he would have us shift states of consciousness when we are going to work with shadow. He would have us heart center first, get connected to the frequency of the heart, and then explore the shadow through the heart. And so that is a piece I will share with you, because the heart can hold everything. The heart is that spark of God, where there is no judgment, right? And this shadow piece also, depending on, what we are exploring in that regard, really, Brew described it as, we are simply addressing a clump of trees in the forest of your being. That's all. That's all, And when you can see that and bring that into the light, it takes the charge off, right? Because often it's the very thing, you'll see people, and certain things make them so mad, and they get so fired up and so, like, just ridiculously reactive, right? And that's a good clue right there, that that's a shadow piece for them that they don't want to look at, right? So you've got to kind of really shift states of consciousness, and get yourself heart centered, and then explore it from there. So when I work with people and we go to these deep places, the safety piece is also essential. I carry a lot of like a divine mother energy. I'm very close to the Mother Mary energetic, and Ishel is like the Mayan sort of version of their divine mother or cosmic mother, and because also I realize how deeply wounded so many people are, right? I mean, we really have the walking wounded, and they express that in many different ways. And so, when I am going to work with someone so deeply like that, I make sure, and they will tell you, that they feel very safe, because you cannot go there if you don't feel safe. You cannot go there if you feel you are being judged and whatnot, because this is not about judgment. And I always say it's really, I call it a course correction. It's just simply course correction, where you make yourself aware of something, and when you do, then it doesn't become such an activated, charged piece. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, it does. It does. So,
Yeah.
um, those triggered reactions. Yeah, I've worked with. I read also. I read tarot and do some. I suppose I don't have never really tried to put a label on it, but I guess counseling work would be
Uh-huh.
more accurate, or the most accurate definition. Uh, what I've noticed within people when I do find one of those spots that really need to be addressed uh, is that yes, you absolutely hit that third dimensional resistance to it, that the thing that they don't want to face. But once you do finally get them to face it, one of the most frustrating aspects that I've come across is when I work with somebody repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly over the same issue, the same thing, and then I'll get I'll at times I will sense within that there's more than just that shadow, that personal built shadow, that there's actually another energy that's attached in there. Have you experienced things along those lines where there's more of a for lack of a better term, an entity within, or an archetypical type energy that's surrounding whatever the shadow is?
Yeah, sometimes. Definitely. Definitely. I mean, depends on, especially, their background.
Right.
Certainly if there's been a lot of alcohol abuse or drug abuse, you will find that. or any kind of physical abuse, sexual abuse. There's often that accompanying it. So yeah, I do find that from time to time, and I do work around that as well. Um, and obviously,
I've come across a couple of really hard cases.
yeah.
People who have gone to all sorts of different places and haven't been able to resolve it. But yeah, and then I've got a whole list of people that I refer people to also, who've done some amazing work that have had. There's been some success stories out of my referrals too. So I continue doing it. But
Oh yeah, well that's just like I was saying to you earlier that there are a goodly number of people who are very quietly doing,
mm,
essential work because when you look around and you see, I really find our culture, modern culture, Western culture, repugnant. I really do, I must say. And you can see in the collective all the signs, the symptoms of how just dysfunctional this culture is, in that people are depressed, super stressed out, they're impatient, they're violent, they're hopeless. There's all these expressions of symptomatic expressions of people, because obviously this culture is not natural right now. We've lost ourselves entirely. So in other words, there are a lot of people who could use this work, a lot of people, and I think growing numbers of people are finding their way to this kind of thing, because also, you know, sort of so much of this sort of modern psychiatry now is just sort of handing out antidepressants like candy.
right.
So people just can numb themselves out, and when you do that, nothing is resolved. And the only way out of this kind of thing is through it. And I think we are so incredibly blessed at this time we're living at now, because there are so many people like yourself, myself, and others like us who can practice this kind of work and not be punished for it, not be run out of town, not be, you know what I mean? So
Right,
we
right.
safely offer this, and it works. It works. I mean, people change in remarkable ways as a result of this. There are things, that this kind of work can do that, sort of the Western medical mindset, you know, can't. It's just a very different approach. And that being said, there is also, I think, there is a lot of room for collaboration there as well, if, both sides would be more open to that. And I am seeing that. I think we are seeing that, as well,
Definitely.
which is exciting.
Definitely. Yeah, a couple hundred years ago, I think everybody I know would have, and myself included, would have been burned at the stake. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're run out of town, but even in the 1940s and 50s, your
Right.
family would just commit you. They'd
Right.
commit you if you were, this kind of weird. And I say WYRD, which is the Norse tradition of the land of weird, with
Right.
those wonderful mythologies.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're about wrapping up this first hour, and let's see. What have you got on the table? I mean, you've got these two books under your belt. Are you working on another book? And I hear you do Skype counseling and this type of work over Skype and that sort of thing.
I do actually quite a bit of Skype, and I have to just give send a quick blessing to whoever invented Skype, because that has been amazing. Because I've got one person in New Zealand right now and a person in Australia who I'm working with. So Skype's a beautiful thing, and so yeah, I do a lot of that. I do a lot of teaching as well. So if you go on my website, you will see the courses that I offer, and I also offer teleclasses. And so that is my way of working with people from all around. And I'm teaching a class actually tonight after we're done, and I call it a Tuesday teleclass, which is a 90-minute class. So for instance, this month is on working with spirit allies, and So those are amazing. And then I am a beekeeper, and I have a beautiful webinar on sacred beekeeping, the path of the Melissa, which is available on my site. And this would be a good time of the year before the bee season to investigate that. And yes, I have a third book. It's just percolating, though. I haven't started writing it yet, so I'm still kind of playing with that.
Fantastic. Good stuff. Well, I want to thank everybody out there for listening to this first hour, and I would urge you to pop on over to her website. It's shonaghome.com. That's SHONAGHHOME.com. And check out her book and all the work that she's doing there. So there's some good stuff there, guys. And I haven't got through the whole book yet, but I will tell you guys right now, it is a very easy read. It is quite informative, and there's some pretty good stuff in there. So I would urge you guys to check it out. Okay, well, if you're not a member yet and you're listening to this on one of those other media outlets, the iTunes or the YouTubes or et cetera, I would urge you to pop over to www.thehundredsmonkeyradio.com and become a member and have access to all that second hour content. We have, I think this is show number 187 or 188, somewhere like that. So anyways, we see you guys after the break. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. And for Mr. Ramon, who is absent this evening, the love you denied is the pain.
Gladiators, blowing tubes that mesmerize, netting minds like butterflies, hapless lying in the night like moths misled into a light. Information overload, trust me, then do what you're told. Tell me who you think I am, give me meaning in a can. Just tell me the truth.